Thank you. Hello. Good morning, everyone. We are...
I'm José Moreira. Most people know me as Zezadas. If you want to follow me on Twitter, there's the nickname.
Yeah, he's the mouse. I'm the dog. I'm Luís. There's my Twitter. We like we like signals and we like ones and zeros and cybersecurity and everything. During the day, we do that usually, what they let us do on S21Sec. Yeah, we do those security things that I think everyone here likes that. So first of all, we love signals, and show of hands, please, if anyone here has ever heard of software-defined radio. Nice, good. Okay, so you're on the right room, I think. What about, does anyone here own a software-defined radio receiver and transmitter? An HackRF or a Blade RF? Nice. Okay, lots of people as well. Great. You guys ever used GNU radio before? Okay, less hands. But we'll try. I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, both of us, we haven't used that very much, and we're starting to. So this talk, the idea of this talk, is to first of all say to you that we're not experts on this subject. We are basically information security guys who started working on radio very recently. We're also not lawyers, but we have consulted one for some things we are going to show you and the things we've done. We try to keep on the right side of the law. So and basically there's a saying on the radio, software-defined radio, is to be a good neighbor. Don't do unlawful interception, don't do jamming, don't do those kinds of things. We try not to do that. So yeah, basically the main objectives here is not to show you any groundbreaking stuff, but basically try to give information security people the enthusiasm for this field, and to show you that is a very interesting field right now, and you should be doing that if you're doing information security. You should be looking into that because there are very interesting things here. And there are very interesting vulnerabilities that have been solved outside of the radio field, but are still abundant in this spectrum. Okay, and yeah, that's it. And we did some fails, and we had some issues that we're still having, and we want to show them to you so you can learn from them and maybe help us for the next steps.
Is there someone here that has some knowledge on DSP, digital signal processing, or any radio on a low level? Okay, not much people. Okay.
So yeah, basically, why are we doing this? First of all, and why should you? Yeah. First of all, there are signals everywhere. We find signals everywhere. Your mobile phones have lots of signals. You probably know that there are a lot of transceivers on your radio transceivers on your phones. We're going to talk about some of them, but not just on phones, right? So on cars, basically, yeah.
The most common that you must know, that's the FEM radio. That's the name radio. So it's pretty obvious, but there are some other components on the car that are using radio, and sometimes we don't even know or imagine that what's happening. There is the wireless key fobs that work with also radio. Maybe you have an atoll system like Via Verde or some other kind that's also working with the radio. Maybe you have Bluetooth for your speakers, that's also radio. Maybe you can use GPS. You have the tire pressure, that's a sensor that measures the tire pressure and sends it to the dashboard and the ECU.
These are the most, there are the obvious ones and the non-obvious ones. You probably heard about almost all of them, and we are going to talk a lot about Via Verde today as well. But for instance, TPMS is a protocol, is a standard protocol to send to the head unit and to the car the current tire pressure, because cars have wheels and wheels are spinning very quickly, so you can't fit a wire of the pressure sensor to the inside of the car. You have to do this wirelessly. So these are the obvious and the non-obvious receivers that cars have as well. And of course, an airplane has like 31 radio transmitters and receivers for radar, for secondary radar, for anti-collision, for in-flight Wi-Fi. Some airplanes have that as well. And we, for instance, ADS-B is something that you can very easily receive with a very cheap radio, a very cheap dongle. We are going to talk about that as well. And actually, I don't know if we're going to talk about this in more detail later. I don't think so. But for instance, ADS-B is not encrypted or authenticated. And it's basically a secondary radar in which the aircraft say to the rest of the aircraft and then the ground stations where I am and where I'm going and my altitude and so forth. And there have been some attacks and some research on spoofing and sending the wrong location data and basically saying that there's an aircraft where there is one.
Yeah, what's happening? That's so easy to receive, but it's also easy to transmit. So it's like you get the good and the bad. You can receive it, but maybe you can do something wrong with transmitting it.
Of course. And there's a lot of signals on your house as well. You probably know that. There are wireless doorbells and Bluetooth speakers and alarms, and you have your computer at home with wireless as well, Wi-Fi. Satellite TV is also a wireless signal that can be decoded. There's your dog chip if you have a dog. I have a dog actually, and I have 2 dog chips at home.
And I think the most dangerous here is the baby monitors, because people buy this to monitor their babies, but they don't have notion that it's unencrypted transmitting, and every neighbor that it's near your house can receive it. And it's like a huge bug inside your house, because anyone in the neighborhood can listen what you're talking about near the monitor or your baby. And some of them also have videos, so you don't want to have your baby on a video streaming.
Yeah. That's not good. And of course, there are a lot of other signals, from satellite signals to number stations. We're going to talk about some of these signals in the next slides. So yeah, and even basically your computer and any electronic equipment usually it does also transmit radio, because it operates they are high frequency devices and they operate at certain frequencies, and they basically emanate radio emissions that can be received by someone else that's not you. This can be a security problem. And there has been work regarding that as well. Okay. So basically, what this all means is that as an information security and as information security specialists that we like to think we are, we see a lot of attack surface in this area. Attack surface that it's not being very explored right now by most researchers that don't have access to software-defined radio. And these are some examples here. These are actually, it's interesting to note a pattern here. Most attacks using wireless and the wireless medium are being more and more frequent, probably because of the cheaper devices right now that can be used to exploit this. And people are getting into this. So basically, this year we had the Blueborn, which was a remote code execution on certain devices with Bluetooth enabled. We had Crack, which is a low-level attack on WPA. We had Mousecheck last year, which was basically sending keystrokes through the radio of an RF dongle, such as this one that I'm using. And basically, yeah, there have been a lot of attacks recently. Some of them can only be exploited using specific equipment. Some of them require you to work at the RF level, but in a way that you can use maybe your own dongle, your own Bluetooth dongle or wireless card. But some of them, for instance, some certain baseband exploits that have been very recent, just last week actually. I wanted to show you this. Of course, there are these attacks as well. Some of them more recent than others. To steal cars, you can basically, there have been news of attacks on restaurants where the waiter comes at your table, activates your key fob, your car key, and has a receiver that is sent. The signal is sent to an accomplice, which is near the car, that unlocks the car, and he steals the inside of the car, and maybe he can actually turn it on and leave. There have been reports of drones, military drones, being hijacked using GPS spoofing, which is also something that you can do with an SDR. Of course, not at this scale, but it can be done. This was just last week or this week, maybe. Some certain reports of GPS jamming in Norway by Russians. I don't know if it's true or not. You can read the paper. There have been some reports about that as well. And also, this is something that I think we can talk about it right here. You've probably heard of something called an IMSI catcher, which is basically a device that can be used to locate you and understand your identifier, your cell phone identifier. Sometimes it can be used, and some devices can actually intercept calls. And it is actually very easily to intercept a GSM call using an SDR device. The problem is with the LTE. LTE or 4G networks authenticate the mobile device requests an authentication of the network. He asks, am I connecting to the right network? And so you cannot easily spoof an LTE from an operator, an LTE network from an operator. And this was just last year. This is research by a Chinese researcher, Zhuang something. I don't know. I can't read it from here. Basically, she found the vulnerability in the LTE protocol before authentication that she could basically downgrade the mobile device, certain mobile device. It could be a directed attack. And she could downgrade it to a GSM network. She says, you're not welcome here to this LTE network. Please connect to this GSM network instead. And that GSM network was a rogue network that could be used to intercept calls. Okay. So this is another slide trying to give you the message of of the attack surface there is, and the ease of attacks that can be performed using RF and using wireless signals. Basically, we've put a Huawei there, Huawei phone, because it was used. It was attacked just last week on Mobile Phone to Own, which is a competition trying to gain remote access to devices. And basically, the guys that won this challenge, they used a stack-based buffer overflow on the baseband processor. Okay, so basically, they used what is essentially a 90s style attack to gain remote code execution to the processor that processes the incoming LTE signals. Okay, so we don't have any of the more modern exploit mitigations that exist on the OS side, which is automated automatic segment layout randomization, memory randomization mitigations, per process permissions. You don't have any of that on the baseband side, on the simple simple software stack that processes the wireless signals. So it's much easier to execute an attack if you have access to the RF medium, and you can perform the attack using LTE low-level packets. So basically, tools. What do you use? And we have some here.
So if you want to start on this field, you must have something to capture the signals. There is a lot of tools that you can have, someone cheaper, someone more expensive, but there is a lot of tools, and there is a lot of new tools coming every day, because it starts to be mass production and it's coming cheaper. So it's a new field to start with. For starting, you have the Realtek SDR dongle. It's a generic RTL dongle with a Realtek tuner. It's cheap. It's like $20. It's not much. So it's not like nice, like a big device, but can have like 2 mega samples per second. That's enough for the most of the protocols that there are.
And the problem is it's receive only, so you can only receive signals and not transmit anything.
Yeah, you can just receive with this one, and the spectrum that it gets, it's little slow. You can get from the 30 megahertz to 1 giga.
1.7 or something.
Yeah.
1.8, 1.9.
It's enough for some fun, yeah. Next, you can have the HackRF one. It's a most expensive device, like $300. That one. This one is capable of receiving and transmitting, but not the both at the same time. It's just half duplex. Or you receive or you transmit. One each. You can have a wider spectrum. You can go from almost 1 megahertz, non-official, to 7 and something gigahertz. So that's a lot of spectrum. And you can have 20 megasamples per second. That's a lot of sample rate. So it's a nice device to start with. You have the Blade RF. It's a more expensive device. This one. You can put an expansion board for an amplifier. I tried this one and I got a walkie-talkie like 3 kilometers away from my house, so it's nice. The spectrum is not so wide as the HackRF one, so it goes from 300 megahertz to 3 gigahertz. But the sample rate that it can go, it's a lot higher, 40.
Yeah, since it's USB 3, you can obtain much more information per second on your computer than with an HackRF, which is just USB 2. So it has a limited sampling rate.
Yeah. Also, the Blade RF has a FPGA inside, so you can program it and optimize your applications. It can go more faster than that. Next, you have the Lime SDR Mini. It's a startup project. It's like a gathering of the HackRF and the Blade RF, just the positive points. It can go a lot higher sample rate, and it has almost the same sample rate that the same spectrum that the HackRF, and the price it's.
We have the prices on the next.
Okay,
slide,
it goes on the next, and I will show you the difference. The last board it's from Ethos research team. It's a more professional board and a lot more expensive. It's like it goes. In comparison, you can go to a Realtek dongle. It's €20. You get the HackRF, more expensive. The Blade RF, more expensive, and goes. You can check the difference. The RTL goes on the 2.4 megasamples. The HackRF go to 20. It's more than enough for the most protocols that you want to work with. But if you want to have a wider spectrum to analyze at the same time and do other projects, you have other boards with higher sample rate. And depending on what you want to research, maybe you want to go to higher frequencies. Like the Via Verde that we were working on. We had the Blade RF, but it cannot go to the 5.8 gigahertz. That's the frequency that the Via Verde is using. So we had to use HackRF. So you have to adapt the board that you want to the research that you want to do.
Just a side note that basically even the most expensive radio is still cheaper than an IDA Pro license. So if you like trying to do cutting-edge security research, you probably should look at this as well. So
also, even if you buy a Realtek dongle, cheap one, you can buy another board, a converter, down converter that converts the higher or the lower frequencies to a frequency that the real telc can receive.
Yeah.
There are also other tools.
Yeah, I think we have a new Bluetooth one here, which is basically a specific device for Bluetooth sniffing. And there's something. Some people think that Bluetooth is very hard to sniff. It's true, but Bluetooth Low Energy, which is another protocol that only has like the same frequency range than Bluetooth, and it's a almost completely different protocol. It's very easy to sniff using this device, and it's a protocol used for a lot of low energy things like smartwatches and stuff like that. Yeah, there are a lot of other specific tools that we can use to do radio here. What we want to give, the main point of this talk, apart from other things that you might learn, is that this is a really interesting field. There are two things that are being aligned here, which is relatively affordable tools and a really like green field of attack surface that's not being very researched at. So this is like the golden age of RF hacking and software-defined radio hacking, and this is a really good time for people start to look at these things. So yeah, there's the theory. We don't know anything about math, and this is the great thing about software-defined radio, is that we can experiment a lot, and we can see the results immediately, other than like having like complex equations and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the meaning of this presentation not to give you the insights of radio in the physics way and the low level, but how you can start with just a little few knowledge and plug your Realtek dongle or whatever you buy and start to hack around. So the basics of the radio, that's you have a carrier wave. Usually it's a sinusoid, and you have the information, and you want to mix that and make the modulated wave that you're going to transmit. So most of you have already seen this. On the top, that's the signal that you want to encode, like ones and zeros. And then...
No, actually, I think it's the carrier wave.
Carrier?
No, it's a signal. Sorry about that. It's a signal.
So, if you want to modulate it in AM, that's amplitude modulation, you can check that the amplitude up and down is changing. So, it's a amplitude modulation, and the period of the waves are the same. So, it's just amplitude modulation. On the bottom, you have the frequency modulation, where you can see the amplitude is the same, and the period, the frequency of the wave is changing. So you have the frequency modulation. It's the two most known modulations that exists. But most of the time you don't want to see that on that level, that low level. Most of the time you use in Spectrum, that's a software that you use for analyzing the signals. And if you look on the first one, so you have the frequency on the y-axis and the time on the x, and you notice on the first image that the frequency is the same, but you notice the color is changing when you have the green line, and it goes to yellow and red, so it's the strength of the signal, and it's related to the amplitude. So you can see that the amplitude is changing and the frequency remains the same. And if you look at, you notice that there are some gaps near the more colored lines, and it's on-off keying. It's amplitude shift keying, and we are modulating 1 and zeros, and this is the Morse code. It's just 1 and zeros, and you send that signal. On the bottom image, you get a frequency modulated signal, and you can see the frequency is going up and down, but the color of the line is still the same. So it has the frequency modulated, but the amplitude is the same. There are a lot other modulation. It's the phase modulation, because the radio signal is a 3D signal. It's a complex number, so it has the real part and the imaginary part. And
Yeah, but we're not talking about math. So yeah.
So yeah, you can see the picture. It's a helix, and the phase is the clockwise that it's turning, and sometimes it goes on the other way, and you have a phase shift.
Yeah, but basically what I've learned, and we don't want to learn anything, the mathematics of this, we can learn it later, but basically from the radio front end, when you capture the signals, we capture two components because the signal is a 3D component, so you have to have like two components to be able to compose a 3D wave, okay?
So the other modulations are just mixing of the three main modulations. So this is the basic of the radio. Since you want to capture the signals that are analog on the hair, you have to convert it to digital, so you can receive it on your computer, and the same. If you want to send, you have to get the digital signal that is on your computer and convert it to analog and send it to the antenna.
Yeah, this is basically just to reinforce the idea that we're sending basically samples, which is intensity of the wave at a certain point, and then the RF component. We are basically modulating the signal in software. That's the thing. That's the thing about software radio, is that we're going to do everything here instead of sending it to the radio and the radio does it. No, we do everything, the modulation in software, using samplers that we send or that we read from the radio front end. So yeah, we have to hurry about it. So
something that you should know, it's higher frequencies have a lower distance that
that's
can
important.
Go. So most of the low frequencies is from boats to communicate like longer distance, and the protocol that they use has in mind the frequency also that they use.
These are the things that we learn experimentally. At least I did. It's basically the stronger or the higher frequency, the less transmit you have, the transmit distance for the same power. So, and the thing is that we are doing this, and if we like me, I don't know. I did know very little about radio, and we learned this experimentally. I think one of the things that we would like to see is that every university has like a software-defined radio for experimenting, for the students to experiment, which is much easier to learn than using math. Okay. So yeah, we have to hurry here. Yeah. So there are antennas, and we are going to show you this.
Yeah, this is like the Wireshark of the networks, but for signals, the software that you use for watching what's happening on the spectrum, and has the modulations that you can. It's just a small software it's the first to use software on the SDR world.
Yeah, and there's Green Radio, which is a little bit scary at first.
Yeah. That's the second software that you want to use, since first you see the signal on GKR-X, and then you want to start to work around with the signals. And on GNU Radio, you can make your own flow graph and modulate and work that signal.
Yeah, this is the back engine of this is in Python, so you can basically you do this like coding in graphical way. There's the source signal on the leftmost side, and then you can like do an FM receiver. This is basically an FM receiver that sends the output to the sound card, so you can listen to radio. Okay. So yeah, this is the output of the
this FFT is a representation of the wave. Since we were capturing a lot of spectrum, we had to shift the station that we want to hear, and then filter all the other signals that we didn't want to hear, and then demodulated it in frequency and put that on the sync audio.
This is a transmitter that does the opposite, so you can have your own FM radio station, which is nice. It works, although we can't use it because we can't emit FM. So we heard about it works. So basically, we are going to show you some of the practical cases, some of the things that we did. They are still very limited. But yeah, we did some progress, and we are understanding that this is a very interesting field.
So if you're doing something like this, be aware of what you're doing. There is Anacom that regulates our spectrum, so be careful. And okay, let's start with this. So restaurant pagers, everyone have went to a restaurant where they give you that pager that beeps or gives flashlights when the food is ready to you pick it up. So I went to a restaurant, there was this with a system anti-rope that's anti-thief active GPS or whatever. Yeah, if you trust that, come on. But we look on the label and you notice the FCC ID. That's American. It's almost like the Anacom, but for America. And it has the ID that has some details about that product. So we started to do some open source intelligence. We went to the FCC ID website and we searched for that serial number, and it gave us some information like the frequency that is working on and some pictures of the insides and the outside. So this is the pager on the front. And since we already had the frequency, I tuned my GKRX to a near frequency to watch the spectrum. And suddenly, after a few times, I start to see a wave coming out. So we had our frequency that the pagers were working on. So we already know the frequency. Let's start to decode it. So I start my GNU radio. I put a source, that's the HackRF, and I save it to a file sync for a further analysis. And I did also a GUI sync to watch the signal where it's happening, appear, and so on. So at this point, I was exploiting the restaurant, because since you have to go to pick the pager will beep 2 times. The first one to you to pick the chips, and the second one to pick the sandwich. So you know, if you capture the first one on when you're going to pick the chips, you can save that signal and replay it later before someone going to pick the sandwich. So can you pass it? I did a GNU radio flow graph to just pick the signal that I had on the file source and send it to the HackRF on the sync to transmit it. And suddenly someone was to pick the sandwich that was not done yet. And that happened. It started to blink and someone went to pick it up. So I have some, then I picked that signal and I went to analyze, and you can see that's a frequency modulated signal, where the frequency is changing, but the color of the line is still the same. You can start here and decode the signal, get the 1 and 0s, and try to get some knowledge of that signal. So what I wanted to do next, that's getting some more samples to compare all the samples and know where's the preamble, what's the ID on that signal encoded, and on a later progress, do a brute force and goes on all possible numbers and flash all the restaurant and do like big party with flashing lights. So other things that you can start to hack, that's a garage door, that's a really easy signal that you can decode. We just need to capture a signal. Most of them work on 430 megahertz. Okay.
No. I don't know if I can.
This is a record of GKRX receiving a radio key fob signal. You can see it go. So you already know the frequency. Let's start to save the signal to further decode. We did a GNU radio flow graph to receive the signal and save it.
Sorry, how much time do you have? 20 minutes. Okay, we have to hurry, man.
You can see the signal appear there. So we already know that we have captured a signal. Let's start to decode it. So we fired up in Spectrum, analyzed, we watched the signal. We knew that it was amplitude. We went to amplitude plot. we slided that. We did a threshold. We got the 1 and 0s, and then we extracted the 1 and 0s to STD out.
Yeah, the beauty of InSpectrum is that you can save the entire signal to a file and then analyze it later and then demodulate it offline without.
So that's your garage key. It's really easy. Next, you just need to do a flow graph on ground radio to receive all the 1 and 0s in a vector and transmit it to your dongle, and your garage door will open. Really easy.
Yeah. Another thing we did was to take a look at SIRESP, which is a Portuguese system of emergency that uses a known protocol called TETRA, which is used all over Europe and I think part of the States as well. It's very loosely based on GSM, but uses much lower frequencies to allow for longer range. In Portugal, it uses around 390, 395, and this is documented in Anacom documentation. Basically, we took a look. We didn't transmit anything, but we took a look at the signals, and they are there. In fact, SIRESP is working in Portugal, apparently. Encryption is optional in this protocol, but it's enabled here in Portugal, so everything is encrypted. So security, yeah, it works. The thing is that it's a really not very known algorithm. It's kept a secret. So there's a standard, but it's not available, so we don't have access to it. But the metadata is not encrypted, so we can actually see the communications as they occur. We can see the transmissions and numbers because each terminal has a specific identifier, and we can see them exchanging voice messages and exchanging text messages, which are encrypted as well. And we have used basically a tool that is already available on the internet for free from a Polish guy, and we have like a video of the thing working. Yeah, it doesn't show anything much, but it shows the correct demodulation on the left, and this is the software that's used to tune into the specific channels and to see communications happening on each channel. And it tries to demodulate the voice communications, but it can't because it uses encryption. If you pause the video, you can see that it's correctly identifying encryption on the voice channel, so it can't be read. So yeah, this is another thing that we did. And for future work, I'm going to publish a Docker file to make it easy to install this software on your Linux, because it's relatively complicated. It has a lot of modules. One thing that we would like to do, of course, with permission, but we would like to look at the encryption algorithm used by this, and it probably can be reverse engineered by obtaining a terminal with encryption and decoding the firmware and reverse engineering the firmware, and basically see if it's possible to obtain encryption keys and so forth. And we would like to know how the terminals are authenticated, or if they are authenticated, and how does the encryption key rotates if it rotates in Portugal. So basically, we would like to look at the security of SIRESP, but we have to ask permission for that. The thing that took us a lot of our time as well was looking at Via Verde. Via Verde is basically a Portuguese wireless tolling system that is used for us to go through the freeways and pay for the freeway use. But we can also use it for paying gas, paying at the McDonald's. Actually, they have Via Verde readers for us to pay. It's an unpublished protocol, although we found the frequency because it's listed on the Anacom website as well. And it's out of reach of most relatively cheap SDRs like the HackRF. But no, actually, the HackRF can reach that. The Blade RF cannot. So we had to basically do some capturing. We went out to the street. Oh, this is the reader. If you don't know it, the reader and the gates. The gates are the ones that have the antenna that capture the reader signal. and they actually do something else. They actually send the signal to the reader, and then wait for a response from it. We actually have a guy in the room that helped us with an open Via Verde reader, so we can look at the chips. We haven't had time to look at the exact chips used, so one of the things that could be done as well is to read the firmware of these chips and see what they do. Okay, so this is war driving in 2017. We don't use wireless cards anymore. That's old school. We basically used an HackRF to go to gates and read the gate signals and the reader signals and getting captures on disk, so we can analyze them later. Okay. Actually, as a side note, these are really big files, so you have to turn on the capturing mode just as you are going to pass through the gate, because they take up a lot of space on the disk. So we got the signals from. This is basically the frequency, the operating frequency of the Via Verde protocol. It's very, very fast. It happens very quickly. It's logic, because you're going through a relatively high speed through the gate, and you have to negotiate the protocol very quickly. And yeah, this is the first signal is the signal from the reader. Actually, this is a carrier wave that's being constantly emitted by the gate, but it periodically sends a request as you pass through the gate. Okay, and the reader reply, the reply is very quick as well. It's just 400 microseconds for a reply to go back to the gate. Okay, the whole process takes very little time. Sometimes they repeat themselves to make sure that they have the correct reading. So what can we learn from the signal? Okay, first the gate signal. It's basically looking at this, we can see that it's amplitude modulated. Okay, there's a carrier wave, and then the intensity goes up and down to modulate ones and zeros. So we did. We could very easily demodulate the signal using Spectrum. Okay. This is, by the way, that José already gave. We basically, it's the period of the symbol is 16 microseconds, and we can easily extract the ones and zeros from there. We understood that basically they have like a preamble. The signal has a preamble that can vary according to the gate. Some gates, specifically gates that are used when the car is stopped, like on the gas station and on McDonald's, have a longer preamble because they can be longer signals because the car is not moving. It's easier to send, and there's time to send it. And some gates vary the identifiers. Okay, we saw different gates on different spots sending out the exact same identifier, so it's static. But some gates have like a sequential number. If you're going through the freeway, you get through gate A, and you get the signal A, and then you get the signal B, a sequential number on the next gate. Okay. The reader reply is not that easy to demodulate. Okay, this is we call this a space invader, or it's a space invader. It looks like a space invader from the game. And it's what we can understand from this. It's not amplitude modulated. It's a much weaker signal, but it's these are other signals that are being repeated by the reader. But by looking at this, we think that this is frequency modulated using OFDM, which is actually something that's very used on it's a big part of Wi-Fi and stuff like that. But we didn't have, and we don't have knowledge yet to demodulate the signal easily. What we by looking at the appearance of the signal, is that it seems to be constant by the reader. The reader always sends out the same signal. That's what it appears to us. Okay. Okay. So the next step, and we wanted to, stop going around in cars into McDonald's. I don't like McDonald's that much. So we want to be able to reproduce this whole process inside the lab. Okay, so we set up a lab environment. Okay, this is us trying to set up the lab environment, José. Okay, actually the we used a very expensive device called a Faraday cage. It looks like a microwave, but it's not. It's a very expensive Faraday cage to prevent signals from coming in or out. Okay, and we used 2 HackRFs, one for transmitting, one for receiving the response. Okay, the reader, it's dark, but it's the reader is there. Okay. Unfortunately, we tried a lot, and so I don't know why this is not working. Okay, since we did demodulate the signal, we could actually reproduce the signal just as well. Just it looked like just like the original gate. The difference here in duration is basically we're using a different signal than the captured one with a longer preamble to make sure that Via Verde, the reader reads it. But yeah, this is our generated signal using the radio, and this is the capture, an actual capture file that we did from passing through a gate. Unfortunately, we were not able to get a response from the reader. We tried a lot, and basically, what we think is happening is that these are very small devices with a very low transmit power in the battery, and because they have a very limited battery, they probably have a very high squelch, which means they only respond to very strong signals. And the gates send out a really strong signal compared to our HackRF, which sends out such a small signal that if you separate the reader from the receiver for like 50 seconds, you can't get any signal. So we would need to be able to send out a much stronger signal to be able to extract the response from the reader. Okay. We also used some, you can see here, actually they're here. These are circular polarized antennas, which are good because they send out in all directions, but they probably concentrate very little power and disperse a lot of power. So maybe if we used a different polarization, we would probably get a read back from the reader. But we're going to keep trying. So we hope to give you guys some news and publish some of our research soon. So yeah, the things we would like to work, of course, with permission, because some things can't be done without permission. But we would like to demodulate the signal from the marker, the reader. Maybe without demodulating, replicating it back to the gate, because probably the gate has a lot more sensitivity and can read back a reader signal and see if we can emulate a reader passing through the gate. We would like to try to obtain the firmware of the readers if it's available and if it's on the chips, and maybe somehow boost the signal to be able to get a response back from the reader. Okay. And yeah, we have this is the main things that we've done. We have a lot of other protocols and fantastic signals to show you. One is the number station. Let me try to...
Most of the signals that we are showing here, or they are really easy to decode, or there is already a software to decode it. This is a number station. You have to sound. It was used by secret agents to deploy them or send him secret messages, and
yeah, I don't have sound, but it's okay. It's basically numbers that...
it had like the Butcher song, and then there was a lady saying some random numbers that in the end it had some meaning for
intelligent stuff and
like
spies,
creepy stuff. Yeah. This is SSTV, so it's used by space stations to stream video to Earth.
These are the things of these are like a data system for interchanging messages between airplanes on airports and nearby, for checklist reporting and stuff like that.
Text messaging.
Yeah. NFC, which is used by a lot of card readers. There's the garage door. I hope that's not a code that from that we use. Let's hope not. Go ahead, skip it forward.
Yeah, you can view the weather stations. You can get image like these ones from the stations.
Yeah, these are beamed down from weather satellites all the time. You just have to have an antenna, pick it up, and demodulate the signal and get a real-time view of the weather stations. Of course, FM radio, walkie-talkies.
Maybe monitors.
This is the signals from tire pressure monitoring systems that have been decoded. I would like to see how this can be used to attack cars. Maybe cars have a hard time decoding these signals, and maybe they can be the head unit of the cars or the electronics of the car can be manipulated. It's just another attack surface of cars, and you should be aware of that. And it's also interesting for having like a way to identify people that pass through your street, because these send out a specific identifier. GSM, of course, you can.
Yeah, you can see the packets on Wireshark. It's really easy.
Yeah, and you can actually have roll your own pirate GSM network if you want, using E8BTS, which is a software that I think we have a slide for that as well.
ADSP, that's the streaming of the planes where they stream their position, their speed, and a lot of details. And you can map all the planes that are near you in the Google Maps, and it's really funny to watch the planes going.
There's a site called Flight Radar. You probably know about it. It uses this data that is freely available to map all the airplanes in the air at a given time. The LTE, you can actually do there's also some software for LTE, but it's not very well developed, or some of it's proprietary, so you can't use it yet. But you can use parts of there's a software called OpenLTE, which you can use as well. GPS is actually not encrypted. The civilian part is not encrypted, so it can be spoofed, and it has been spoofed. The military part is, apparently. Yeah, okay. It's spoofing GPS. The RF dongles, proprietary RF dongles, also use, and there's a thing called mass check. You heard about the attack. It's also being used. Is using injection of these signals. Of course, there's Ubertooth, Bluetooth Low Energy, which has very little security, and you don't actually need specific hardware to do this. These attacks. Wi-Fi, Iridium, which is a satellite phone system.
Voice and data.
Voice and data you can use. I don't think you have time for this, but basically we just teach how to steal a car here, so it's not that important. Now it's just basically using jamming to obtain a signal and then repeat it back to the car.
Since most of the old cars didn't disable the old signals that weren't received, you can jam a signal and then filter the signal that was coming from the key fob and reuse it because it was not invalidated yet.
Yep, and you can steal a car with this as well, so it's nice. And also, you can make your own GSM network. I've published a Docker image on my GitHub with easy to install E8BTS. Please do so in a place where you have to be a good neighbor and you have to have license to transmit, of course. The idea here is this is a really good time for you to be looking into SDR because the hardware is cheap. It's getting cheaper. We can learn a lot without the math. I remember in college trying to understand signals, and I really couldn't understand anything. But experimentally, it's much easier. The transceivers, the devices that decode all these signals have really bad vulnerabilities that modern operating systems don't have. So if you take a page out from a FRAC article from the 90s, how to buffer overflow, you can probably do that on the code that's running these receivers and these transceivers. There are a lot of 0 days waiting to be found. Just last week, there was one on Huawei devices. Of course, you have to respect the laws, local laws, and be a good neighbor. And I don't know if you want to add anything else. Basically, it's the golden age of software-defined radio hacking, and we hope to have given you interest in start exploring this field. Thank you very much. Any questions? Do we have time for a Q&A, or does anyone? There's one.
So, have you looked into biomedical devices? I think that would be an interesting thing.
We hadn't the opportunity, but yeah, there are already some papers about the insulin pumps. The pacemakers also have RF. So
yeah, of course. You probably know about Barnaby Jack. They did very good work on that. We don't want to kill anyone, so we have to have like devices to test on, and we don't have them. So yeah, but that's another area that's very interesting, of course.
Anyone else?
You can mention that.
No? Yes, that's it.
Okay. Thank you.